I realize something now that I thought I would share. I'm a big believer in incest, okay? If I haven't made that plain, it's worth repeating. Because the purpose of this video is something else I never realized before. The reason why I never married my ex-honey is because I've always viewed her as my kid sister. Okay? That's why I never married her, not for any other reason. And a sister is not somebody necessarily you have to love like you would love a lover, or love like you would love a parent. You love them like they're your sister. Yet, in addition to that definition, is a definition of sister that I possess that nobody else does. So, let's go over the inventory. My brother's not into it. It scares him. My mother's not into it. It grieves her. I'll let you guess why. She grieves and not some other emotional reaction. My father, my first father, my real father, probably would have agreed with it, and that's probably why he masturbated when he was a kid and his father stopped him by whipping him. And that's probably why he continues to smoke to this day as Ethan Hawke, for the same reason that he smoked as my father. Because he recognizes he lives in a pressured world that is convinced that its morality is good for everyone across the board. It's like communism, when they all dress alike, Mao Zedong, and when Soviet Russia was communist, uniforms, Well, it's kind of like that with sexuality. Oh, one size fits all. We'll decide what's right for everybody, and then we'll apply it to everyone. Well, it doesn't work that way. It's entirely a personal thing, very highly personal, and not everybody's the same. Charlie Lutz would say that concerning nudity. Not everybody's the same. To imply that it's not going to work for everyone. To be confronted with it, let alone participate. So, because there's a lot of identification that happens with sexuality, and so when you see somebody naked, you feel naked, even though you're not naked. My grandmother pulled that one on me all the time. Oh, I feel cold, put some clothes on. Well, she had clothes on. No, that was her way of saying she was embarrassed. She wasn't cold. She lied. So, being that I saw my now ex as my kid sister, and being that I'm a believer in incest, but it's not socially correct to admit to it in society, but I got a big mouth, and I'm fearless, and I'm not ashamed of myself. The only time, if I have a problem, I have it with my conscience. It's between me, myself, and I correct it when it's effortless to correct, when I see that the problem can be solved very effortlessly, if it's a problem. But when it comes to sexuality, there's no point in suppressing it. I've learned this. And so what the hell are you holding back for, If you've got any feelings. And it doesn't mean it's right for everybody, but if you believe in it, but you suppress yourself because everybody else says, oh, it's wrong, and so you're not going to be able to fit in, no, that's your choice. If you want to suppress something that you believe in just because you want to fit in, shit, you live with that consequence. But I don't have to, and I choose not to. I make my own choices according to my standards, and I live by them should the opportunity arise, and it did. I came into a relationship with somebody who I saw as my kid sister. I never married her. We had a child, and the child was taken from us because because people objected to my nudity. But if I had had sex with my son, I guess they would have objected to that just as easily, or even more so readily, or whatever. And maybe nudity represented a lack of desire on my part to fit in and suppress myself if I have to. Well, come on, that's so bogus. There's no need to suppress. You just make choices. For instance, I'll give you an example. If I have to put on clothes, then I can't sleep with bed covers, because the two conflict. And I learned this a long time ago. That's why I chose not to allow conflict to happen. So rather than give up the bed sheets and bed covers and blankets and quilt, I gave up my pajamas instead. And underwear. All of it. I slept naked. I've been sleeping naked ever since the age of 14. I came out of the closet and became I demanded to be allowed to walk around the house naked when I was 15, but that was because I had issues with my other issues. Like, we won't get into that. That's a sidebar. But it solved the problem of being strangled in my pajamas. Well, I noticed just now that I can't be strangled if I have no sheets to strangle me, no bed covers to strangle me. So my clothes are not conflicting with me, they're conflicting with the bed covers. And that makes sense. Why have bed covers if you've got clothes on? You don't need bed covers, you just lay down and go to sleep. On top of some nice comfortable surface, but you don't need anything to cover you. In addition to wearing clothes, come on. That's so bogus. So you see, I have my very distinct opinions about how to do things. And incest is not one of them to prohibit. It's just to call it incest, It's called, a love between siblings instead of fighting. Good grief. What did John Lennon say? Make love, don't war. Apparently that's not too popular either, or else he wouldn't have been knocked off. So, deporting him wouldn't have helped. They tried. Didn't shut him up. So, so that's what my nudity represents, is a lack of sexual repression, a lack of desire for me to fit in to what the social engineers have decided shall be correct for our society, and everybody has to conform. One size fits all. Wrong answer. One size does not fit all. Some people will object to incest, and some people will go along with it. And it's for each person to decide for themselves. What standard will be in their family, what's allowable, based on what's allowable to themselves. So, to be denied my own family just because it's against public policy to be a nudist or to be incestuous, good grief. Get a life, guys and gals, come on. It's not for you to live vicariously through other people by telling other people what to do. You just take care of yourself, that's enough. And the people under your nose, that's it. Don't go beyond that. It's a waste of time. You're making nothing but shit for yourself in the long run. It's your loss too, when you tell somebody else what to do when it's not your business. But my brother thought, oh, we're brothers, not anymore. He left the house when I was 15 and he never looked back. So he has nothing to do with me. My mother made him a trustee to her trust. That does not make him conservator. I helped him create that fantasy of thinking he was my conservator, thinking that he could take away my son, by virtue of giving him my trust. To not know that he was devious enough, that he was laying the groundwork for acting like he appears to be my conservator, and he convinced everybody. Even though he's not. No court ordered that. So, trust is a funny thing. I gave him what he abused. So, maybe he thinks he did the same thing. Maybe he thought he gave me something that I abused. I'll never know. He never talked about it. Unlike me, he's not very communicative. He just gets emotional and reacts and acts on it. He doesn't really come out and say, well, I don't... let's work this out. No. He doesn't even know how to have a relationship. You're supposed to communicate. You're supposed to negotiate, not just communicate, you know. But he avoided both. Where did he learn that from? My father? I guess I'm lucky that my father never raised me then. So you see, incest doesn't fix everything. No, my father communicated. Ah, but did he negotiate? Possibly not. That's right. Actually, it's not a possible. He actually did not negotiate. That's true. Well, okay, so he went halfway. He was a good communicator. But my brother didn't even do that. So I don't know what went wrong. He communicated with my mother. I think communication only happens if you feel like you have enough in common. So his emotional reaction against communicating with me is simply an indication that he doesn't share anything in common with me to begin with. And that's probably why I left home when I was 15. He felt like he didn't belong. Because I was doing everything I could to adapt, and he refused to. So we had a difference of opinion, he and I. He's not adaptable. So he's more like my father. We got to do it my way. And so he made himself conservator, as if he was my father. And I really didn't dig that too well. I did not approve. I did not like that. But how much power and authority do I have over my own affairs when somebody like that wields so much power? Because I gave it to him. Naive enough not to understand what I was giving him, out of trust. So, how did I start this video? Oh, on, what did I start this video on? What was the premise? Ah, yes, how I viewed my ex. I viewed her as my kid sister. You know, I bet I know why. I met my wife from my last lifetime in college, before I met my ex, and we acted like we were siblings. And you know, my stepfather in this lifetime was my father in my last lifetime. Uncanny, isn't it? And he married us off, my playmate and I, to save money. That's all. Just to save money. That was his entire motive. In this lifetime, he wasn't any different. He adopted me just so he could write me off on his income tax as a deduction. He wasn't my father. He never acted like one. Anywho. So he married us off to save money, and we didn't have anything in common except we liked sex, and that was it. Oh, and we were independent when it comes to doing our own work. This is something that really fascinates me, that I learned in this lifetime when I met her in college. I offered to help her with her math homework because she was having trouble with her math. I said, no, I'm going to do it myself. And you know what? My mother had the same. She'd say it to her mother. My mother in this lifetime would say it to her mother, Mother, I'll do it myself. So my mother had that same notion that I have, that my wife in my last lifetime had. No, thank you. I'll do it myself, even though she was struggling with it. And that made me so proud of her. But my feelings toward her was like a sibling, like a sister. The familiarity was there, as if we were siblings. Yet, I didn't love her, you know. But it was a familiarity that made it easy to be together. But question why? If we're not in love, why? Well, when my ex of this lifetime came along, I was so hungry for a relationship, I didn't bother to ask such questions. I just went for it. After a year, it took me a while. Took us both a while. And, our son Kyle came out of it, and everybody objected. My brother, the police, probably the city attorney of L.A. If the police object and the city attorney hires them to do their job to enforce public policy, then you can imagine the city attorney is probably objecting as well. And not just the city attorney, but anybody else associated, like the district attorney and everybody else. So, in that ballpark. So that's the way I view her, and I realize now she was my kid sister, and I kind of knew that, but I need to remind myself, and I do that by telling you. What else? So I solved my problem of how to sleep with clothes on, and not sleep naked. Adjust the heater to the right temperature, push all the bed sheets and the bed covers down to my level of my ankles to keep my feet covered, and have no conflict between what I'm wearing and the bed covers whatsoever, and I'm able to sleep with clothes on. What a simple solution. But incest, hey, I'm me and you're you, and everybody else is everybody else. And gee whiz, when are we going to recognize it's okay to be different? It's okay. It's not the end of the world to be unique. See, this is something my brother and I would disagree on. He insisted, and this was early on in my days as a meditator, we went out on a camping trip in the snow, and I learned that trip. I don't think I shared this with him. I kept it to myself, but I learned from that trip that I and he differ on a very fundamental reality, how we view God. And interestingly enough, well, I don't want to go there. That's a sidebar, so I don't want to. If it's directly relevant, let me keep my sidebars to a minimum. So, what the difference is between us, or was, it may still be though, for all I know, is that he believes that we're all alike and we're all separate from each other. Why else would he leave home when I was 15? Because he believed that leaving home, he was actually leaving me. See, my son is with me all the time, subliminally. He's just not with me physically, and that's what bothers me, that there's a difference between subliminal awareness, or subtle, refined awareness, and gross awareness, the senses, the five senses. But he's still with me subliminally, and so that disparity bothers me. Well, that's what I bring him into the world, So my brother believes that we're all separate and we're all the same. He couldn't have been more wrong. And I'm going to explain why, so let me get to it. So I believe the opposite, that we're all unique and we're all united. Now, what's the difference between these two systems of thought? They're both balanced in and of themselves, you would think. Wrong. They're not. You know why? Because one is holistic and the other is not. Can you guess which one is not holistic and why? Okay, I've given you enough time. I'll tell you why. The missing piece is the absolute. The unqualifiable, without attribute, absolute, transcendental nature of reality. The impersonal aspect of God, the impersonal aspect of existence, which Maharishi very adroitly chose from the English language the word being, to be, existence, to exist, the verb. I don't know what it is in Spanish, but whatever. I'll stick with English, it'll make it easier for me. Being, existence. It's totally impersonal. Existence is totally impersonal. Yet, it is God. Western religion does not recognize the impersonal aspect of deity. It just doesn't. Yet the existentialists did in Germany. I don't know, well, sort of. They didn't call it God, they called it the void. See, so science is like the existentialists in Germany. They call it the void. Well, that's bogus. It's God. You just call it the void because you don't want to recognize that it's the impersonal aspect of God. Well, that's your problem. It's not my problem. The experience of the impersonal aspect of God is normally called bliss, but bliss is not an emotion. It's totally void of emotion. So, you see, that's why existentialists call it the void, because it's without feeling. That doesn't mean it's the void. Far from it, it's fullness. But they don't have much sense for what's full. They think, oh, well, I'm devoid of feelings, so I'll call it the void. Great. Anyway, so that's the part that's missing. Now, what's the consequence if we ignore that and all we think about are what the five senses tell us, what our feelings tell us, which, feelings are the subtle sense of touch. See? So feelings are involving one of the five senses, the sense of touch. So that's why bliss is beyond feelings. So when we ignore the impersonal aspect of God, namely existence, and don't figure that into the equation, what happens? Well, we think about it, what the five senses tell us, and that's in the field of relativity. Because existence is coexistent with relativity, which has to do with distinctions and differences. So what people do is they say we're all the same. They whitewash it and say we're all alike and we're all separate. You know what unites us is existence. And you know what existence does? It allows for differences. But when you don't recognize existence as being the fundamental aspect of God, even more fundamental than he or she, the divine he or the divine she, or the supreme being, all of those are personalities, no matter how you shake it. Especially if you give it a name, Ishwara, Yahweh. The Union Hebrew Prayer Book, in one sense, will talk about that which has no name, it has no attribute. Yeah, in the next sentence, we'll mix it up by calling it God the Father, the King, the this, the that. We'll start giving it attributes. Like, what? They're confusing things. Come on now, keep it straight. It's only the mind of man that confuses things by making distinctions. So fine, for our sake, we make distinctions, but there's a reason for them. So the impersonal aspect of existence unites us, because it's the one thing that's the same for everybody. But all other ways that you can think about anything are differences. They're qualities that make us unique. So we're united on the level of the impersonal aspect of existence, just namely existence itself. Yet our qualities that distinguish us from one another make us unique. They do not make us separate. They make us unique. Because existence still unites us. Because it's like a superfluid or a superconducting in that it can trespass our uniquenesses and unite us thereby, while still allowing for uniquenesses to coexist with our unity in the simple fact of existence. So as meditators, we have something in common and are able to help each other because, we recognize our differences every other which way. We're, unique, but only our existence unites us. And for that sake alone, we can be friendly towards one another. Otherwise, there'd be no reason, right? We just look out for ourselves like everybody else does. But we don't have to share anything in common, just existence. In our twice-a-day practice, to remind ourselves that existence is at the basis of everything, yet it is without quality, other than the fact that it is, It's got an isness to it, but you can't qualify it. You can't say it's a void. You can't say there was a time when it was not. Existence always is. Even when we're in samadhi and there's no thoughts, we still exist. So it's really weird that anybody would try to make a distinction, but that's what unites us. And that's what we highly personalize from our own vantage point. And we call that our self. So we qualify everything in terms of the self, but it's still existence. It's just seen from our point of view, and so we call it the self, or the self-reference. but it's still existence. It's just been qualified by the self. That's all. So existence has no quality, but we qualify it because we exist and because we give it a reference. Anyway, we don't have to worry about that argument. The argument was, what's the difference between my brother and I? And so, when you believe that everybody's the same and everybody's separate, you're basically ignoring the absolute nature of life, and all you think about are the senses, the five senses, which are extensions of the mind, by the way. So it's Maya, basically. And so you have to create this illusion in your mind that you're separate from each other because you're denying existence, because you're afraid of the void. You're afraid of transcending thought. You're afraid of sensory deprivation. Well, when you're in the transcendent, it doesn't bother you. And when you come out more full than you ever had been previously, because you've got all this being that you've contacted, and it dissipates, but some of it doesn't, because it literally gets integrated into the physiology. And every time you contact being during samadhi, and then, bleach away whatever can be bleached, so to speak, and integrate whatever you can integrate in activity, then you keep building up your reserve of a lively existence that you never had before, because it was just in potential form. And that lively form of being is what makes enlightenment defined as enlightenment. It's a lively existence, more lively than before, because it's a liveliness that spans the entire scope of the mind, gross, subtle, and everything in between, and even beyond that, beyond the finest relative to existence all by itself. So the very samadhi that we experience during meditation, upon death becomes the mahasamadhi, in which the body is dropped and samadhi is left alone by itself, just like when we were meditating and experiencing samadhi, only now it's permanent because we no longer have a body to limit our existence. Because when we come out of samadhi after meditation and come back into activity, we're actually limited by our body. But when we become so familiar with existence during samadhi, such that it is maintained 24/7 all the time, even when we're out of meditation, and even when we drop the body upon death, then we have a status in which being is now lively, fully engaged, yet we don't have a body to get in the way, and so that's truly living. Truly being, I should say. That's truly being in a very fully endowed sense, which we didn't have before, or else we wouldn't have taken this temporary body on a temporary loan in the first place, except to build up, have an opportunity to build up that lively aspect, or the dynamic aspect of existence that we've never been able to do before without the help of meditation and yoga and samadhi, as the whole point of meditation is samadhi. Not anything else. Not controlling thought. Why would you want to control thought? Any more than why would you want to control incest in somebody else? If you don't like it, that's okay. So you control it So if you don't like it, there's no need for control in yourself. You would naturally be repelled. So you see why control is a waste of time? And interpreting nirodha as control or suppression is a big mistake in the field of yoga, which has had a ripple effect in the field of the householder existence. We're into control too. Society is predicated on control. But it's wrong. And it need not be. So if we didn't make the mistake in the Yoga Sutras of interpreting nirodha as control, then we would not make the mistake within the householder's social existence either. Neither. and we wouldn't do it there either. And we wouldn't have incest as a suppressed standard. And we wouldn't not have it as a enforced one either. We would let each person decide for themselves. And usually the parents are in charge of the householders, so, they would probably decide, maybe, I don't know. But, that problem is easily solved. Because once the kid reaches the age of 5, then you set up a children's house in the community, and all the children go there who are ready to go there because they've been weaned by the age of 5. And so there's no point for them to staying with mother. That's the only reason for them to stay in the house is because they're breastfeeding, right? But when they're weaned, they have no business staying at home. They could go into a children's house because they learn from their peers anyway. I found that out from my nephews. They learned more from their peers than they actually learned from their father, who talked to them nonstop. Well, my father talked to me, so I'll do it to my kids because I loved it. Well, his kids didn't like it. Dad, all right already. How many times I heard that? They learned more from their peers than they ever learned from him. And they learned to hate me. Or not trust me, let's put it that way. So, what good did he do them? Really? They would have been much better off having a community children's house that the children built themselves, with no help from adults, and they go there the minute they're weaned. Whether it's bottle-oriented weaning or breastfed-oriented weaning, regardless. They go there and they stay there till they get married. That's what, I really revere a tribe in India, in the jungles of India, that's separate from Hinduism, has no contact with the outside world, and they have their own way of doing things. And that's a very significant part of it. They have a children's house built by the children, and the minute they're weaned, they go there until they're married, until they finally pick somebody from the children's house to marry, that they want to live with for the rest of their life. Now, doesn't that make sense? And every 2 nights or 3 nights, they change partners. They sleep with a partner. And it could be anyone. Could be a sibling from their own home, Doesn't matter. They sleep with them. They have to change partners because that's their main prevention against getting the girls pregnant in the children's house, is they change partners every 2nd or 3rd night. And they have a grooming routine just before bedtime. But the main thing is they change partners and they sleep with someone. They pair off. It's very important to them that they sleep with a partner. Doesn't matter who. Just as long as it's not the same person as the prior night. They try to change very frequently. Because they believe that it's habituation that will cause accidental, teen pregnancies and whatnot, accidental pregnancies. So they avoid it by swapping partners, but they don't deny themselves sleeping with a partner, even at the tender age of like 4 or 5, when the child is weaned from its mother. They're already starting to sleep with a partner right away. And they have other rules, I don't have to get into all of them because they're really weird. But that one isn't. And so that's the rule of their children's house that I'll share with you. Other than the fact that they build the house themselves. No adult makes it. Those are the only 2 rules that I find very fascinating that I'll share with you. And the others, I don't know, it's not too important. So you see why I don't believe in suppressing incest, because that's sexual repression on a social grand scale. And in this community in India, they didn't practice sexual repression at all. Or sensual repression, whatever you want to call it, erotic repression. They didn't. They fostered it. And they made sure that it was satisfied and taken care of the minute the child was weaned. Now, if a child is breastfeeding, they're clinging to the mother's breast, right? So they're not going to undermine that because the kid needs food. So they only take the child and put him in the children's house when he's no longer getting breast milk. Makes sense. Why deny him food from his mother? So, we're the ones who bottle feed our kids instead of breastfeeding because it's not convenient. But that's the only reason why they choose the age of 4 or 5, because that's when they're weaned. My ex-honey would tell me that she was weaned at a very late age. I can't remember, but it's not the normal age. And that's a good thing. That's commendable. But that's the only reason why they leave the parents is because they wait until they're weaned. Because that's a bond that's very practical, getting food from mommy. But when that's no longer needed, then immediately they leave home and they go into the children's house, and they don't regret it. Look at all these partners they get to swap out every other night, to sleep with. I mean, hell, who wouldn't want that? So they have a lot of peace. They have no thievery, no crime in their community, no social deviance, nothing. They have absolutely no problems. They are a tribe without problems, which is unheard of. So Wilhelm Reich was correct. And everybody who kicked him out of Europe and put him in prison, and he died in prison just before he left prison when he was here in the States, nobody believed him, not even Freud, his teacher, his benefactor. Everyone kicked him away. Why? Because he believed that repressing our sexuality is wrong. So there you go. It creates a host of problems, which need not be. We got enough problems, And sexual repression is a biggie. It ties up emotion, it ties up energy needlessly. It's not serving any useful purpose. To turn it into a crime? To be yourself? To turn being yourself into a crime? Just because you're different than everybody else? The only problem with having social deviance is society's problem. Yet it burdens the individual with its mistake. Take the Native American, for instance. The Native American doesn't have any problem with homosexuals. It has a means in its culture by which it accepts them, traditionally. Apart from any influence from, Western influence. They have a role in society, and they're given a place, a niche, and so they're not suppressed. Well, okay, that helps. It's not the entire solution, but it helps. So it's one less problem. It's one less repression of our sexuality. So it improves their lives that much better. So it's admirable, but it's not the entire solution to be recognized as such. It's not enough, but it's a start. So I'm giving it as an example. Anywho, I don't talk about incest too often because there's really no need to, but it came to me that's how I saw my ex as my kid sister. And I saw my son as my son. So, Anyway, I've said enough.